Hey, everybody, it's Eric J. Olson here with another live episode of the Managing Partners podcast. And today I have Ed Perdue. Hey, Ed, how's it going?
Hi. Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm great. I appreciate you taking the time in the middle of a busy Tuesday to join us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, Ed, we always like to get to know our guests and the managing partners that join us. So can you give us a little bit of information about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I live in Michigan now, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I was in the Marine Corps after I graduated from college. I was an officer for 4 years on active duty, and then went to law school at Notre Dame, which is how I ended up in the Midwest. Met my wife out here and decided to stay here near the stadium, which seemed to be very important at the time. And I've been here in Grand Rapids about 26 years or so, and really love it out here. I've built a nice practice, and starting to do some different things. So I was with a big firm for 24 years in big law, I guess you'd call it, and I started my own firm last February. So it's been an interesting time to be an entrepreneur. But making it and enjoying it and doing lots of different things now, which is exciting.
How was that transition? Obviously, February was probably like a rough transition, and then March came, right?
Yeah.
And coronavirus.
No, it was not the best timing. I'm a commercial litigator mostly, and so a lot of the money that you make and time that you bill is in depositions and discovery and court hearings, and all of that essentially came to a screeching halt in March for us in Michigan, as I imagine it did for most people elsewhere. And so, you had to really grind it out, and things are starting to open up now, but it's been a year of really grinding it out on the litigation front. But as I said, we survived, and things are looking better every day.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. People say timing is everything, but I don't think that's really true, right? Because there's always a need for almost any business that you're in. Now, there may be less of a need in, like say the coronavirus recession for particular kinds of businesses, or more of a need for different other kinds of businesses, but there's always a need. It's just a matter of going out there and kind of finding it. When you went out on your own, were you able to bring some of your clients along, or how did you kind of make that transition?
No, that's a good question, Eric. There are different schools of thought about when and if you should go out on your own, and one is that you should have a certain steady stream of work or a stable of steady clients, and I really didn't have much of that because of my area of practice, and it's always been sort of a grab bag as to where the work is coming from. But I had a certain level of faith that things would work out, and I had asked, friends of mine whether or not it was really worth a leap of faith and whether that was going to work out. And they all said, just trust that the work will come, and it'll come from places that you didn't get work before when you're with the big firm. And, trust that that it'll sort of be a manna from heaven situation. The work will be there, and you just have to believe that you're going to make it. And that has proved to be the case. Even in the dark times of the pandemic, I was getting work from former colleagues of mine at my old firm, and people that have said, now that you're a smaller operation and your rate is lower, we're going to call you about this or that, and stuff that we would never have dreamed to send you before, even though we think you're a good guy and all. The corporate structure of your last firm was just not conducive to this kind of work. And so I've been getting a lot of that. It's a much broader spectrum of work that I'm getting now than I was before.
That's really interesting. So, yeah, so it's not necessarily that you brought clients along per se, but they found you in your new firm, and yeah, since you didn't have all the corporate overhead, it was a more reasonable rate, I guess, and more appealing. That's awesome.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's been It's been really interesting. People told me that that would happen, and it's difficult to believe that it's going to just appear, the work, I mean, but it has to a certain extent. And, I made a point to leave my old firm on good terms. And, I built up a lot of great relationships and friendships there over the years and didn't leave on any bad note. And so, I would say that my old firm is my best source of referrals. I just made
Yeah.
it clear that, I was there for a quarter of a century and I wanted to do something different and, in large measure, be my own boss, but also to build something with the culture and the ethos that I wanted to shape myself. And so, not that there was anything wrong with the old firm I was at, but this is something I wanted to build. And at my age, I was 52 when I went out on my own. I felt like I had to really go for it or just be satisfied, and I wasn't willing to do the latter.
That's right. Good for you. That's incredible. So congratulations again. So
Thank you.
a little over a year now in business for yourself, practicing with your own law firm. That's great. You mentioned commercial litigation. Do you have a particular niche of like industry clients that you interact with?
Well, here in Michigan, we do a lot of automotive litigation. And so if I had to pick an industry, that would probably be it. And then with respect to other commercial issues and disputes, I'm sort of an expert in the UCC. But really, especially now that I've been on my own, any kind of civil dispute, any kind of business related civil dispute is something that I'll handle. And I've also opened up the playbook to a certain extent. I've been authorized as a federal and state mediator, and so I'm now doing mediations as well. So that opens up sort of another line of business for the firm. And then a third thing that I'm doing, which is exciting to me, is last year around the same time that I went out, I
No, that's new business calling.
yeah, it is. I don't know if I should shut that off here. I went out on and I published a book on leadership called The Little Green Book, A Leadership Manual for Professionals. And I'm doing a related speaking practice
Nice.
for that. And I guess you would call it a leadership speaking and training practice, not only for law firms, but for companies. And so companies and other organizations, keynote speaking, things like that. And so I'm very passionate about that. And that relates to my service in the Marine Corps. Things that I learned as a young officer, young artillery officer. I had noticed that I had been imparting those principles and techniques into my litigation campaigns with some success. And so over time, I started writing down how I was doing that, what the principles were that I was applying, and then expanded that into what the Marine Corps and history teach us about how to lead and win at work. So that is something I really enjoy doing and am passionate about. And so I'm excited about the future and the opportunity to speak to firms, not only associates, but partners also. We talk about not only leadership techniques, which you might imagine would be suitable for partners, but also the principles of war, things like mass and surprise and offensive tempo, and how they might help practitioners with their various legal campaigns.
That's interesting. Can you give us an example?
Sure. Well, two of the principles of war that I think are most applicable to litigation are mass and offensive. And mass, for example, in the military context, means bringing all your assets to bear at a critical time and place to maximize the effect of those assets. In modern terms, we talk about that in terms of massing firepower and the effect of mass weaponry. But in a litigation context, you can imagine that the critical time and place will be the day of trial or the day of arbitration. And you have to think ahead about how to make sure that you've done the legwork to bring all your assets to bear, human resources, co-counsel, research counsel back at the firm, runners, anything like that, plus have your technology ready and your evidence prepared, have your outside experts, ready, have all the witnesses subpoenaed correctly. Make sure everything is ready so that on the day of that event, everything is there ready to go and you have effectively ready to drop a bomb on opposing counsel. But, an offensive relates to keeping up the tempo and essentially, forcing your opponent to react to what you're doing instead of giving them the opportunity to be doing things to you that force you to react, And so maintaining an offensive tempo typically has benefits that exceed the isolated, impact of any one thing that you're doing in regard to your plan.
So I'm not a lawyer, but to oversimplify the example, is this where, like, on TV or movies where, a defendant's lawyer will bring 5 lawyers with them for some minor infraction, and so the prosecutor's like, oh, this is going to be a problem, kind of, something like that much firepower.
Yeah, it's nice to have the firepower. I'm not sure if the 5 lawyers would be suitable in that context, but you can see in the criminal world, in the criminal legal world, you can see how assets and resources often do benefit wealthy or well-off defendants as opposed to indigent defendants, right? Resources and manpower and the best attorneys typically do have an impact. So, I do civil litigation, and I think of that more of making sure you have all your ducks in a row the day that you're there, so that all your preparation is done, and you've thought about what else can I bring? Can I bring animations? And do I have enough demonstrative exhibits, photographs and charts and timelines? Do I have all that ready? And do I have enough experts? Do I have everybody ready to be there? Are all my witnesses lined up? So on the day of trial or arbitration or mediation, whatever it may be, I'm freed up to think on my feet, to react to things that I'm anticipating I will not know or have to react to. And so by freeing up sort of that, that capacity to think, you are in a better position to react to the unknown, to be prepared to think on your feet and execute the plan. And so building in to your plan, really, the knowledge that you're going to have to react to the unexpected really lessens the impact of any surprises, and sort of at least mentally makes you think, I'm not really surprised by this because I planned for it, even if you didn't know about the specific thing that they were going to drop on you.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of, thinking about the future, we have a couple questions about that. So one is, you've been practicing for 25 plus years, right?
Correct. 25 years, essentially.
25 years. And I'm sure you've seen, quite a bit of change in the industry and technology in particular. What sort of like technological or financial or even legal trends do you see kind of unfolding right now that other managing partners should probably be aware of?
Well, I'm sure this is on everybody's mind, and that is, the whole shift to video conferencing, and in terms of hearings and even trials. So the reality is, I think that those may be here to stay, and not that every hearing will have to be via Zoom or some other technological medium, but I think it's going to be fairly common for that to be an option. And so you may even see a rule change in the future where what used to be considered unavailable because of the location of the witness may not any longer be considered unavailable for purposes of identifying witnesses and having them available to testify. So I think that's one sort of technical issue that we've seen. And on the management side, this pandemic has also caused a shift in where people work from. Obviously, it's the elephant in the room is that nobody's really at work right now. And I think people are starting to go back to their brick and mortar buildings if they had them. But But the cat's out of the bag. The reality is people know now you don't actually have to be in the office to be effective at work. You might even be more effective if you're not driving, half an hour or an hour to work each way, right? So I think that's really been an eye opener for a lot of people. And on the negative side, if you have a big firm with lots of Class A space, you're probably wasting that, and when your lease comes up for renewal, you may want to consider whether or not you're going to need all that space, or do you convert some of that space into smaller, more efficient flex space where people can just plug in their laptops at work and not have, actual offices assigned that are going to sit empty 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And, along those same lines, when I went out on my own, I was shopping for space and for copiers and staff and all of that. And because of the time, and one positive was that I never really got a chance to pull the trigger on any of that. And so I had to sort of make do with the home office that I had built, and then get flex space both in Grand Rapids and in Detroit, which I use when I need conference rooms or staff support. And having that sort of a la carte support system has been very efficient for me, and really kept my overhead extremely low. So that's been a big positive about the pandemic for me. And going forward, I really have to consider strongly whether or not this is, the right model, because, a great deal of what I bring in goes directly to me and not to overhead.
Yeah. Yeah. All great points. Definitely. Yeah. The pandemic has certainly changed the way people work, and probably will for the next, at least couple of years. I have a suspicion that, at least as far as how we work as a company here, and then also at various companies, will gradually go back to normal. But things like, the video conferencing, that just makes a ton of sense, even if you're in the same town, right? And like you said, for witnesses and whatnot, that makes a ton of sense. It's just so convenient. So I can see that sticking around for sure.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of comments and questions. So number one, from Kevin Daisy, who is the co-host of the Managing Partners podcast. Sometimes I'll interview, sometimes he will. Kevin says, "Thanks for your service, Ed."
Thank you.
And yeah, I should have mentioned that before. Appreciate that. And
my pleasure.
From Sean, so we had a guest on recently who was a special masters, and that was a new position term for me. I wasn't familiar with that. So Sean's asking, how does the post-COVID special masters differ from federal and state mediation services? Are they linked at all? And then do the opposing counsels seek you out, or judges?
It's a good question. I don't have a great deal of experience with special masters, but they are separate things. So a special master is typically, in my experience, have been appointed to handle sticky discovery issues, or particularly contentious, discovery or other litigation matters that the judge feels will be very time intensive and would benefit from somebody sort of riding herd on, independently of what the judge can do with his limited time and availability. So, there's a number of different circumstances where those can arise, but you can imagine a difficult discovery situation might be one where a special master is appointed to sort of help the parties or provide some guidance to the parties on what's going to be permissible and what won't be permissible in discovery. Mediation services, on the other hand, when you're acting as a mediator, facilitative mediation is the buzzword these days, and you're really acting as a neutral, a negotiation coach, essentially, to help the parties come together in a settlement. So that's in the settlement context as opposed to the litigation context. So they are different. And as to whether special masters are typically sought out by judges or opposing counsel, I think it varies. The judge might say, I have a special master, that's my regular go-to person, and that's who I want to use. But he might, or she might also say, I want you to come up with some names, and I'll make a decision between them, or some other variation of how that special master gets appointed.
Got it. Okay. So special master it sounds like almost, and again, to oversimplify this, almost like a an assistant judge, if you will, from a research perspective. Is that kind of fair to say? Whereas the mediator is more of a replacement for the judge.
Well, you're right in the sense that it's the special master would be working on something for the court. So he's assisting the court in some discrete aspect and freeing up the judge's time, so the judge doesn't have to spend time sort of refereeing some aspect of the case. And the mediator is typically there to help parties settle a case. And so that's really in the settlement context, whether it's court mandated or the parties come together on their own to settle a matter. Either way, the mediator is there to help the parties come together and try to reach a settlement.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, I appreciate the clarification. We're going a little long, so I just have one more question. So, new firm, a little over a year in business. What do you see as your growth plans for the next couple of years, maybe as far away as 5 to 10 years?
Excuse me. Well, it's a good question. I think, planning on bringing some people on. I have some people working on a project basis right now for me, but that's really the biggest plan for me, is to try to find people that I'm compatible with to work on the work that I'm bringing in. And we are starting to bring in quite a bit of work. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm working with various marketing professionals to get the word out about my speaking practice, which I'd like to grow, and really have to think carefully about how to grow that. But that's really one of my main focuses right now in terms of growth, is how to get the word out about the training and the leadership speaking that I do, and the benefits of that to different firms and companies.
That's awesome. Well, good for you. It sounds like you definitely have a plan. I think the book and the speaking makes a whole lot of sense to get the word out about you. So congratulations once again on launching your firm like a month before coronavirus landed in our backyards. But sounds like you've done very well. So yeah, congratulations. If someone would like to reach out to you, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
They can call me on my phone, which is 616-516-6284, or through my website, which is www.perduelawgroup.com, and Perdue is with an E. And you can reach me at my email, which is eperdue@perduelawgroup.com.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. And for anyone who's watching, if you are looking to spice up your law firm marketing, please check out Array Digital at arraylaw.com. We offer SEO, website development, and other digital marketing services. All right, Ed. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Got it.